It's after 5:30, and I know many people have to get home for the next. So I'd like to just get right on with business that we came to do. So my name is Peter Nielsen, and I've been with the Central County school system for a couple of years, working as business manager and doing finances, et cetera. And I'd like to, before I go much further, introduce our two superintendents in AOS 93, Lindsay Johnston, who has been with us for quite a while as a superintendent, and is now focusing on Great Salt Bay. And Todd Sanders, who's been with us for a couple of months and is focused on the four municipal school units of Jefferson, Noblesboro, Bristol, and South Bristol. And they are team superintendents as part of the reorganization that we are in the middle of right now. And we're going to talk about some next steps in that this evening. Background to how we got here to this moment tonight, I would share that something on the order of January of 2023, which must be 20 months ago, Lindsay began this restructuring initiative to work with her team to examine what would make more sense than the very sort of complex system of an alternative organizational structure that we have been saddled with since 2009. And there's just a lot of pieces of that don't work well. And we've talked about that. We'll talk more about that in the presentation. But as we began to look at things by the end of last year, November, December, there was a proposal put forward to the school committees to consider forming a single RSU out of the different towns that would have taken the four smaller schools, if you will, and made them into pre-K through fourth grade, and then concentrated all the fifth through eighth graders at the Great Salt Bay School, kind of make a middle school out of it. That didn't go over very well with school committees or other communities because of the traditional value for local control. And that's something that we heard loud and clear. There was a piece of that proposal, though, that was sort of the last slide that said, we also know that we could look at forming an education service center to support this. And the school committees and people we presented to were like, that you should look at. That could be a good idea. So things started to kind of shift around. All kinds of things were moving at that time. As we started the new year, we did start to explore the education service center that we're going to talk about tonight. But at the same time, Great Salt Bay chose to begin to form their own RSU out of the three secondary school committees of Bremen, Deverstown, and Newcastle's 9 through 12 school committees, combine it with the Great Salt Bay Community School District and form an RSU for pre-K through 12. Okay, so that has begun. That is in play right now. The voters have all chosen to do that, and it'll take effect at the end of the school year, or at the end of its fiscal year, June 30th. And it'll be Great Salt Bay RSU, a single school district, pre-K through 12. It'll be an RSU. At the May board meeting of the Great Salt Bay School Committee, which was then all inclusive of the secondaries, they chose to withdraw from the AOS at the end of this fiscal year when they become a RSU. So we know that on July 1st, 2025, which is now just 10 months away, there will be 4 less school districts in the AOS. The AOS 93 will just be Noblesboro, Jefferson, Bristol, and South Bristol. That changes a lot about how the AOS will function, and we'll cover that tonight too. The ESC in general is a way to continue to offer cost optimization and efficiency for everybody. That's always been in AOS 93. So this is designed to allow Great Salt Bay to do what they've already chosen to do, create a flexible model for the other schools to continue to make decisions about how they're going to be governed, et cetera, and how they're going to work in the future, and to continue to deliver the cost optimization and efficiencies of services regardless of what they do. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. There is a model to do that. It's one that the school committees will ultimately vote to either become members of or not. But because we're a community where everybody interacts with everyone and everybody has a say, you're all stakeholders in this. It's not just the school committees that need to know this. Everybody really who's paying attention should understand about what's happening and be able to discuss it. So I thank you all for being here. I'm going to present this. I don't know how good it's going to be for your eyes. Linda Skiff back there by the cabinets has paper copies. for, if anybody wants one, she can give you one so you can see it right in front of you. All right, so I'm just gonna begin. We have been known as AOS 93, but the sort of brand name, unique brand name that's been used is the Central Lincoln County School System. And that's been used, as far as I know, since 2009. And it will continue. We will continue to be the Central Lincoln County School System. The 7 towns that share these set of relationships that we now share and will continue to share will, with everything that we are projecting in our restructuring, continue to be the Central Lincoln County School System, and will carry that overarching identity. Within that identity is the Central Lincoln County Education Service Center. And that is where the services will be provided to these school administrative units that are within the Central Lincoln County school system. So, why are we doing this? I ask myself that a lot. And is it like, I would not want to be pushing something out there if it wasn't really needed, but it is really needed. The AOS model was created in 2009 as a sort of afterthought for the towns that were more independent than the others, who did not want to comply with the state mandate to form an RSU and start consolidating school districts. And for various reasons, and I can imagine some of them when I look at the map and see coastal towns and inland towns kind of next to each other, towns out in Western Maine that are in kind of unique places. You can see where the AOS is end up, and you can see why they didn't naturally form tight bonds. And but they didn't. And there was a lot of schools involved that were, as we have here, a lot of K-8 schools that had unique identities, unique cultures, and they did not want to lose that, and they still don't. That's what we heard loud and clear from all of you last fall when we put out that single RSU model. But the AOS model is broken, outdated, not really supported by the Department of Education. They put it out there and they said, okay, if you're not going to form an RSU, you get one of these and live with it. And as things become adapted for the RSUs, they don't get adapted for the AOS. Our problems get tougher and tougher and tougher with no way to alleviate them. And the CSDs aren't even offered anymore. You can't form those. So it's down to this DOE is basically maintaining RSUs. And then they put out the ESC a few years ago. We'll get to that. But a big problem with the broken AOS is that it had all these disparate school districts in it. It was asking a single superintendent to serve. So what we ended up with in our community, and we saw how difficult this was a school system where one person, one individual, no matter how talented they are, has 29 school committee members that all in one way or other think that's, they are the supervisor of the school, of the superintendent. They are, and they know that they can call that person with questions, and the 29 people doing that is much more than is sustainable. Okay, 5 principals for direct reports. That's not all that unusual even for an RSU, but it's a lot of work when you have 29 school committee members as well, and 6 or more central office direct reports, and a kind of broken system that you're managing. So from just a management point of view, this is not the model you want. And that's why we've changed it already to have 2 superintendents that can kind of work and focus more on the different school systems and have less people that they are either reporting to or reporting to them. The AOS towns are increasingly divided with strong cultural and political differences. I think we can all acknowledge that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I actually enjoy being part of that, because there's something about every single one of the towns that I serve that I really love. And there's something about it that I learned something from, but they're not the same. And they shouldn't be bound into trying to kind of work on something that doesn't really appeal to some of them. So you have I've watched a lot of 6-1 votes at the AOS board, a lot of 5-2 votes. And it's not, to me, that is just a fracture. That doesn't mean one side won. That means that you're losing someone every time. Okay. And when it's the same towns, the same people, it just doesn't feel healthy. All right. There are real significant divides, and we can honor those divides better than we can try to hold it all together. We now have 2 superintendents. I've talked about that. That's a good thing. It's working well. Got a few kinks to work out as to how to communicate with each other when things are moving fast. What we're doing that. Great Salt Bay, forming RSU, leaving the AOS. We want to be able to offer a continuity of services to everybody and let this be flexible for those who are moving out or combining in other ways. And we do want to have an efficient, modern system for lots of reasons. I mean, it's obvious. You don't want to be working with an old broken truck that you can't get parts for, and then you have to just sort of like 3 days out of 5, you can't get it moving down the road. And that's what the AOS as an infrastructural, financial entity feels like. We can't be a fiscal agent for our own programs. We can't do the things that you should have to do. To make it easy, we make it hard on ourselves. We do things 9 times instead of once. So a solution that we've discovered now, we are presenting for the boards to vote on in the next couple months, is an education service center. And it'll be known as the Central Lincoln County Education Service Center, part of the Central Lincoln County school system, along with Great Salt Bay RSU, AOS 93, and anything that kind of forms later. This separates, okay, the transactional services that are, you think of what's done in the business office, payroll, accounts payable, the other things that are not all that emotional, if you will. They just need to get done, they need to get done well. From the relational work of the superintendents, which gets pretty involved, which is managing teachers, managing the curriculum, managing principals, dealing with students, dealing with sexual harassment issues, dealing with all kinds of things that are not transactional. They involve human relationships and deep human relationships, and they're not scalable. You can't scale that kind of problem solving. You can scale how many accounts payables you can get done in a week. You put more time into it, more get done. But the relational piece is different. And this allows us to separate these two. We're piloting this now with the blessing of the AOS 93 board that asked us to work this way this year and get it all moving. And we need to submit an application to become an ESC by the end of October. So that's only, whatever that is, 6-8 weeks away. It's coming right up. So we have to do a lot of work in the next couple of months to figure out how this is actually going to get done and how we do it. We would launch ESC on July 1st of 2026, the same day GSB leaves the AOS and becomes its RSU. All this is moving in tandem together. And the ESC would include financial administration, it would include what we do at the Central Office for Information Technology, for nutrition, for adult ed, and a little bit we do in the business office to support transportation and facilities. We're not going to take over all that work in facilities and transportation area, but we already do a lot of contracting for it, things like that. We'll get to that in a moment. So what is an ESC? Back in 2018, about the time everybody who was in an AOS was just kind of realizing this doesn't work and this is breaking. And the legislature created through legislation the ESC, Education Service Center, as a multi-service agency that could provide services to school districts. It's not a school district. It's an agency that provides districts with the things that they need, and it's owned by the districts that are its members. So all these school districts that we have in AOS 93, if they join this and they become members of it, they operate it, they govern it, they own it. But it's not a school district, but it's where you can contract to get your payroll done and all the services that we're talking about. So it's basically just a contracting with something you own to get the services you need. Okay, but it has its own governance and its own way of operating. So that the governance of the Great Salt Bay RSU is just for Great Salt Bay, but the governance of the ESC includes Great Salt Bay, but it also includes all the other towns. So it's a way to break up different pieces and govern things in different ways. And all of the information about an ESC is here on this website. This whole presentation is up on the AOS 93 website and under Strategic Vision 2025, not to be confused with Project 2025, but it's up there and you can go in and there's a link here in this slide And you go right to the DOE website, that is the section under the regional services or whatever, that gets into all the details of the laws around education service centers. I'd love it if you did. I'd love it if you could find things I missed. I appreciate the participation of everybody in building this together. So I encourage people to go here and see what you can find and come back with further questions if you want to. So right now, the central office does financial administration for all the schools. This is what we do. We'll continue to do this. We already do it. We'll continue to do this. We're not going to do anything else. So what I'm getting at is that the actual activities of the central office, business office, will not change. The people in the jobs, God willing, won't change too soon, and we'll continue to be who we are doing what we are, just under a different governance umbrella and a different taxpayer ID number and a different name with different laws about how we do it. But basically, we're not changing what we do. We provide all these financial services now. We'll continue to. Information technology, this is new to the AOS this year. These taxpayers funded a information technology director full-time. That is a position that's been building slowly over the last decade at the AOS. And we did advertise for a IT director to begin to do these things. We have not been able to fill that position. Labor shortage and timing didn't work in our favor. So we still have to work on that. In the meantime, we're doing a few other things to kind of get by. But this work would sit in the ESC as well, as it does in the central office now. Nutrition services, that's the food program. We have a nutrition director, Michelle Miller, who oversees the operation of each of the schools' nutrition programs. And this is the list of what's included in that role and in the delivery of those services. And this is the same list we do now. It's the same list the ESC would do. It's just under the ESC identity and umbrella. Transportation administration. Now, I think most of you are aware that Great Salt Bay has a fleet of buses. Jefferson has a fleet of buses. They each have somebody responsible reporting to the principal who's either the transportation director or head driver or whatever the different titles are, who help the principal run those programs. And that's the way it will remain. The other schools, we contract with First Student, and we work on a detailed contract, 14 buses that do these different routes, and that's 5 years long, and we manage that from the central office. We also have to buy buses for Jefferson and Great Salt Bay, deal with the whole rigmarole that involves with the state and with any bus reserves and things like that. And we operate that under the business office. And we also do all the transportation reports that are due for the DOE. They want to know miles for each bus, things like that. And the business office takes care of that now. We also make sure the fleet's insured. We do this now, but we do not get involved with who picks up who, where, when, and how. And we don't want to. That's not what we mean by administration, transportation administration. That's operations, that stays in schools. But we will continue to provide the same level of support we currently do. And the same thing is true for facilities. We manage the RFP process, we do all the contracting, we do the buy energy at good rates because we have a big deal we do. And we look into sustainability initiatives for everybody. And it's just the business and contracting end of the facilities management. We don't get involved in designing a parking lot, or we don't get involved in what is needed for what schools need to do with their maintenance. We help a lot because a lot of that is doing some financial research, et cetera. But the school committees, their principals and their head facilities people all work on that plan. And I show up just to make sure they get the resources they need and the contracting and bid is all done right. So these aren't areas, facilities and transportation, that we will have additional personnel beyond what we have right now. There's that, currently, I do this work now, I'll continue to do this work. Adult education. Adult education is unique. There's no other AOS that runs an adult education program that doesn't have a high school. So our AOS, we use Lincoln Academy, and the majority of our students go to school. we don't operate a high school, but adult education, working on the graduate equivalency programs and the other enrichment activities, et cetera. We are kind of like held back from operating in any efficient way whatsoever because we are not allowed, the AOS is not allowed to act as the fiscal agent for anything. So the adult ed program has to go around and get to every single public meeting that you have, the 7 towns, and ask for its funding in pieces. And a lot of you, towns put them on the nonprofit donation part of your articles. And to get the signatures required to do that and to make the presentations for that ends up being like all our director of adult education is able to do for 3 or 4 months of the year. And it's a crazy and efficient way to operate. By bringing it into the ESC, we can just roll this budget together with these other services and just get it passed all together at the same time. And we can work directly with the adult ed director as we do now to manage all the other grants and things that they get and do all the finances right in the same bank that we're working with, you know, the AOS already. We don't have to go, right now, the adult education budget for all 7 towns lives inside the bank account of Great Salt Bay for no good reason other than by law, and AOS isn't allowed to hang on to that money and manage it, which is just crazy. So the management staffing plan for the ESC, an ESC has an executive director that reports to the ESC board. We'll get to the board in just a second. The executive director, we have the directors of nutrition, information, technology, and adult ed report to the executive director, and the business office staff report to the executive director. It's the exact same staff as we have in the AOS. It just is a different plan. We are not planning any new positions because we're in ESC. If any new positions come down the road that we need, they'd be the same positions that might be needed in the AOS. And I'm not saying that's going to happen because we all operate with like, let's keep this thing as small as we can. But there's nothing required additional because we're in ESC. Nothing. So the governance. There's the board of directors. It's built almost exactly the same as the AOS board of directors, but hopefully we're making a couple of changes that are responding to what we've learned about how the AOS works and doesn't work. There's a director from each member, meaning each school district. Meaning Great Salt Bay RSU will have one director, South Bristol will have one director. No matter what size you are, you have one person as your representative. And they are appointed by the school committee. So just, that's no different than what you do now. You send someone to the AOS board rep, you have an ESC board rep. But in this situation, because there's a level here that we're providing only services to school administrative districts. And those school administrative districts have superintendents. Those superintendents have advanced degrees of how to provide education. And they have certification and they have years of experience doing this stuff. They sit on that board. And they are able to provide their view of whether or not they get the services they need. And they're able to direct the services they need by being at the board. They don't get to vote though, because the votes sit with people who are democratically elected school committee members to vote. But when they're sitting there talking about what they need, that's going to influence the voting, and that's the point. Okay. So each member's vote is weighted. Now, each member's vote in the AOS is weighted according to how many pupils they have. We're going to change that. Each member's vote is weighted according to the district's financial contribution as directed by the cost sharing formula. Now, the cost sharing formula for the AOS, regardless of whether the AOS will all stay together and not changing, or whether it changes into this, or whether it changes into something else, is under review right now for the September meeting of the board. Is going to look at it. There's been a lot of concern that the current cost sharing model is not equitable. It's all done by the number of pupils, and so
the census.
The census, okay, it's done by the census, and the number of inhabitants. Okay, but what ends up happening is that, like a town like Newcastle, just for its secondary contribution, is paying something like $88,000 for the central office to basically just send checks to Lincoln Academy. Whereas South Bristol where that gets all the same services for their school committee meetings from the superintendent and the oversight of the principal and the budget work that we do and the budget committee work that we attend and all that work that gets done. So Bristol's current contribution is 74,000. Jefferson's is up around 330. You know, Bristol's is up around close to that. And it's just when you look at it, you go, this is if we were asked to kind of look at where our time was going, and it doesn't match the dollars coming in for our time. So it has to get changed. So we're working on that now by having a minimum fee. And it's calling it an economic inefficiency fee. For no other reason than that's what our lawyers told us to call it. But what it does is it kind of brings up South Bristol a little bit and distributes around everywhere else. South Bristol will still be the lowest paying member, but it does pull it up a little bit, try to move toward equity without doing anything punitive, you know. So that's the change. The other change is that right now, you know, anything greater than 50%, 50.001%. Of a vote of the members of the board would be an action. And as I said earlier, that to me is just becomes divisive. It's just a majority rules and everybody else can lose it. That's the way it falls. And I believe that changing it to a 2/3 majority does shift it. So it takes more people to agree, stronger consensus to make any decisions. That 2/3 is, you know, 66.6%. The numbers are all up there for how this works. If anybody else has any recommendation for if that should be adjusted up or down a little bit, it's all about how can we find the fairest model so that decisions can be made with the most involvement. But it gets a little weird because you have some big groups and some very small groups. And to try to find the most equitable thing and still all work together, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect. And you don't want it so that everybody pays the same and gets the same vote, because that's really going to punish more than happy, you know? So these are the recommendations that I could come up with, that we've all come up with. That would seem to be the fairest, you know, just from a neutral perspective, fair. Bring people together to make decisions instead of split down the middle when a decision is made. And I'm really, those are some of those 2 points. The cost sharing formula and the weighted votes are really where rubber hits the road with this, and where I would love to make sure everybody in this room is thinking, paying attention, looking at the numbers, being critical about it. I honestly believe this is the fairest thing, but you could change my mind if you showed me what the math was in a different way. And I think we're all open to reaching this together, and not just me saying it's going to be 2/3, and I hope you go for it or not. It can be adjusted. Maybe that should be 68%. Maybe it should be 62. Take a look at the numbers and stop them. So the cost sharing formula is pretty much what I just said. A minimum pay to play gets it up closer to, and we have to do a lot of work in the next couple of weeks to get ready for the AOS meeting in September, because we really now have to decide. We did some work on this in March of what goes in the AOS, what goes to GSP, what goes in the ESC. We have a very good model for this that we already completed, but we got to fine tune it for FY26. And then come up with what the number at the top here. I think it's right around $100,000, but we'll determine whether it's 90 or 110, et cetera, when we look at this math. And then the remaining allocation goes back to, I have here PK through 12 students, but let's say it's census, not a census of everybody, not just these number of students. So we'll fix that. Or maybe this is a better way to do it.
The ALS board votes, their weighted votes are by census. The distribution is by student count.
Okay. Hope you all got that?
No.
There's both census and student count are included in different parts of this formula. And this is why we have to tweak it right down and make sure it's working for everybody. So we're doing that right now. So, and then we just have to say, how does this change over time? Or does it stay the same? It's not about whether or not the budget goes up 5%. It's about whether or not the minimum changes. There is a bit of an incentive in this. There's an incentive for people to join together and have less districts. That incentive can be pushed harder or taken out altogether. It's just there as a tool for everybody to consider. Budget. Same process as the AOS 93 central office budget that we do in the fall. You know, we work on it with the AOS board in the 2 and 3 meetings, and
from October to December, and then we bring it to the taxpayers around December 20th. That doesn't change. Except the structure of the budget, the particular ESC budget would change. It doesn't have special ed, it doesn't have the superintendent's office in it, but it does have adult ed. But the AOS budget would be passed essentially at the same time, so you'd see these things back to back for the towns that are, you know, both in the AOS and in this. Then GSB would still do their work at their May meeting, passing in June. So we didn't, the ESC law statute, it doesn't require us to do this, by the way. And our lawyer said, oh, no, you don't have to have a public meeting to pass your ESC budget. You know, you're just like a contractor, like mechanical services or the green and landscaping guys. You just say that's what you're gonna charge. And that's what they either pay or don't pay. They were like, no way. That is not gonna be received by in any town in the world. You know, well, never mind this community. We're used to doing it this way. We want to keep it this way. The taxpayers have for years approved the central office budget. There's no interest on our part to mess with that whatsoever. So despite the fact that it's not required by law, we want to keep it that way because we believe that's what the community would want and what the taxpayers deserve, et cetera. So we follow the same process as we currently do. There are some state incentives for this. Each school district that's a member will get $94 per student added to their subsidy for being a member of the ESC. So if you have, you know, if you're Bristol and you have 210 kids or so, you're gonna get about $20,000 added to your subsidy. And if you're, you know, Great Salt Bay, well, actually, you get it for the secondary kids too, and I was only counting who's in the building. I don't have the numbers of the secondary kids at the top of my head the way I do, but if you have about 300 kids in Bristol, you're gonna have about $30,000, okay? So you get it for everybody pre-K through 12, and that adds up to about $150,000 with our current number of students. So we get $150,000 goes to the towns. Depending on how many students you have, you get the towns get those additional subsidies, they go into your budget as new money. It's not gonna pay your whole budget, but it's gonna be another revenue source on top of what you have now. It also pays the ESC directly for 50% of the executive director's salaries and benefits. And that is capped out at like $85,000, and we wouldn't hit that right now. But say 75 would be a contribution there. So 150 and 75, $225,000 coming into, you know, these schools, right? All schools put together for joining the ESC. And then pretty much the only thing the school, the DOE will buy for you if you're an ESC is an enterprise accounting system. And I told them that we just bought that. And they said, but the ESC didn't buy it, the AOS did, so we'll give the ESC money to buy it from the AOS. And that's worth about $75,000. So you end up with almost $300,000 the first year that we would receive as a state incentive to operate the ESC. Once they buy that Aptifund thing, then they pay the support on it, but that's not too much. And you get back to just the sort of $225 a year that's rolling in from the state as additional subsidies. And that's, you know, I wouldn't make this decision on $225,000. Collectively, you're about a $40 million organization, you know, but 225, I wouldn't walk away from it. But I would make the decision on the benefits of what you get out of forming a new city, and I think they're significant. You need to make sure you have cost efficiency and financially optimize the operation of these schools and school districts. There's no walking away from that. We all have to, everybody in this room has to be doing everything we can to make sure that happens. And by breaking up business offices and you know, these offices into multiple places providing these services is not efficient. If Great Salt Bay tried to replicate the central office on its own, it would add $500,000 to their budget. On top of it, you know, or 750. St. George is a school district right up the road here that does that for one school, and they spend like $800,000 a year on their business office for one school. If we had to do that multiple times, we'd be hemorrhaging money for no good reason. And what scares me the most is somebody who has to kind of pull it all together. We don't have people. There's a huge labor shortage. We can't find multiple HR payroll clerks, I can promise you that. We can't find multiple anything. We can barely find what we need to run one central office for this place. And to break it up it's more about, it's less about money to me, than you don't have the people to actually operate this if you break up, and it will be more expensive. It also increases the local control. And this might be something that I'm not selling you, kind of used car reviews. I'm not making this up. But by combining your services and working with each other to get cost optimization of services, you're able to do more in your local units than you will be able to do if you don't. We already have Great Salt Bay as their own superintendent right now, who's doing a lot more for Great Salt Bay than she was able to do for everybody. We're now working more closely on each grant that they get and on what their, changes are in their services. And I know that there's a lot of work going on in the building and with the team there. That's local control, and it's happening because the ESC model is possible. They can go do their thing. If Bristol and South Bristol decide they want to work together, and they don't want to be bound by the increasingly large vote share that Noblesboro and Jefferson will have of the new AOS, Great Salt Bay is not in it. The model changes when Great Salt Bay leaves. Instead of Great Salt Bay having 39.4% vote in the AOS, and South Bristol having 5.5%, and Noblesboro having 14.7% or whatever it is, Jefferson having 24%, Bristol having 22%. It changes so that there's that 40% that Great Salt Bay comes out of the AOS 93. The decisions are made by 4 towns. Noblesboro and Jefferson will collectively have 61% of the vote, and Bristol and South Bristol will collectively have 39% of the vote. The 939 students, pre-K through 12, in AOS 93, and basically Jefferson and Noblesboro will be able to run the governance of the system administration without any input from Bristol and South Bristol voting under the current model. If you have an ESC, Bristol and South Bristol can change that and can potentially exit the AOS if they choose to do that. I'm not pushing that on them. Still get these services from the ESC, but they have maintained their local control. There's other models too. Maybe South Bristol joins Jefferson. I don't know, but I'm just looking at what's more likely. But the fact that there's an ESC that all 7 towns can get their services from without increasing their costs or trying to find the people to do it allows these conversations to go on. Without the ESC, these conversations change dramatically and are less flexible, and you begin to lose local control because you're stuck in these other paradigms. In addition to all that, you would now have a system that's modern, efficient, that the DOE wants to help kind of fine tune and make work for you. You don't have that fiscal agent problem where you can't operate a regional shared program. You don't have some year you may decide that paying rent for this building for a central office isn't not worth it, and that you could buy it, and you can't do that as an AOS. You could choose to do that as an ESC. You can't own property, you can't be a fiscal agent, all these sort of hamstrings on an AOS that will hold you back and make you less flexible to be cost efficient will be gone. And you'll be able to recruit and retain talent a lot better when you don't have that name AOS hanging over your head. In my, world of public education administrators around the state, it is commonly known you don't want to work in an AOS. They're dysfunctional. It's going to be meetings all the time, and there's going to be political headaches left and right, and you're better off in a different kind of organization. That's just the truth. Now, doesn't mean we don't have people in it now that are high talented, but it does mean the burnout rate's probably higher. And I think you've experienced some of that. And it does mean that when you are attracting new people in new positions, you got to get the ones that are a little tougher and a little more ready to go for something, who want to live here and who want to face the music of what it means to be in a really complex system. And I'm just telling you, the truth. I've heard it from people who I don't want to work in AOS, stay away. And personally, I'm attracted to my whole career was in startups that didn't exist to begin with. So I'm attracted to business turnarounds and problem solving, things like that. I love this thing. And I love these communities. But I think I'm unusual. There are risks to not forming it. It's not like, wow, let's just wait. You don't want to all start, if you wait, people that now might join will say, forget it, I'm not waiting for them. They would, they'll never get off the dime, and we're just gonna start doing our own thing. And then you don't have those numbers later. They've moved on. The costs that you now have will escalate unnecessarily because you could do this, but if you don't, you start running into, oh no, we need this, now we gotta build this, we don't have it from them. We aren't partnering with those guys anymore, our costs go up. You get into these local control challenges because of the financial problems, you settle for things that you need because they will save you money, even though they're taking away from your ability to make your own choices. And you have the AOS is left still as fractured and vulnerable alliance, just like it has been, and just like we've all been experiencing. And you start losing people, it happens. They're like, we tried, didn't work. I'm not making any threats, I'm not saying that that's how I feel. I just watch around me. I watch with my own team. I've been through 30 accounts payable clerks in the last 6 months, 2 human resources. I'm going on my 3rd human resource person in the last 3 months. This thing is hard to manage. People are working 7 days a week to keep it together, and they burn out. We need something that's more efficient, and we want to attract people to these jobs, not drive them away from them. And that's really the labor shortage. And it's just going to get worse unless we kind of make it so that it's more functional, higher functioning, bring people together, less divisive, and start operating like we know how to move things forward. So, to get this done, we gotta move pretty quickly. I'm gonna take your questions tonight. I've already spent it's about the 7th time I've given this presentation, trying to give it 100 times. But we did this at all the August school committee meetings, and I appreciate all of you who've heard it multiple times that are coming back for more tonight. And we are giving it at the professional development workshop days for the 4 MSUs. We gave it at the administrative retreat. We talked to all the principals about what was going on with the ESC and the assistant principals and other directors. And we're here tonight to talk to all of you. And then there'll be discussion again at the September school board meetings. But then they need to vote. And they need to vote no later than their October meetings, because the application to get this in, to be able to do this, to be able to have it approved in time to have that subsidy increase in the January ED 279s and be in your budgets in March is the end of October. So it's time to take action. And I believe this is the action you want to take. So I'm right at the road here in the central office most days, but I'm always available on my cell phone or by email. And I would love to talk to any of you that want to talk about this and to dive into any details. I've had the opportunity to speak with many individuals, school committee members and others, and to answer either a whole set of questions that have come in by email or sit down for one day I sat down for 2.5 hours with a school committee member from Jefferson, and we went word by word through the interlocal agreement. And it honestly, it's a pleasure, to see somebody that wants to be engaged like that and challenge all the thinking. And I learned a lot from that conversation. I'd love to do that more. I'd love to be able to say at the end of this that we were absolutely transparent, engaged a lot of members of the community, and had their input on this and made it better. So I'm willing to do that. So it took a while, I know. But anybody have any questions?
Can we go back to the cost sharing and Lindsay, you were very clear, but I'd like someone, either of you, to clarify.
Sure.
The board, the AOS board, each town has one member, one representative on. The board's weighted votes are done by the census, so every 10 years their weighted votes are updated. That's the only part that's done by the census. Everything else in our district is done by student count. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we want to change that.
Yeah, I believe it. Right, but that's good.
Andy?
Is there a way at all to model, what these fees look like for each member, without being informed yet? You talked about how there would be an increase, the minimum of $100,000.
Yes.
And so what does that look like what does it look like for Denver?
So we did a model of that at the March AOS meeting, it's in the folder, it was shared at that point, the model looked like, we called that the revised AOS 93 budget. That was reviewed in March, and that included pulling out the ESC, talking about what GSB would do here. That was a preliminary one, we fine tuned that a little bit for the, we got to the last meeting in May. And made a few little adjustments once we knew, exactly who's in the positions of superintendent, what the contracts look like, so we updated that. Now, for the September 13th AOS meeting, just coming right up. My next task after getting through this tonight is to do exactly what we said for FY 26. And that will be available no later than Friday before September 13th for the board packet. So that's when I know it'll be done. But I'd be happy to share it with you and Kevin and others, and you can kind of take a look at it, see if you see any problems, we've done that before, and we can discuss what it's gonna look like. But it shouldn't look, aside from the shift in the minimum pay to play fee, it's the same expenses. It wouldn't be any different than if we were the AOS, except we give this, money coming in for the additional subsidy. The totals. But we will do that. We will share those numbers. That's what's coming up.
Right, just that is my question. If you think about withdrawing the cost of superintendencies from the AOS budget, and then look at a percentage of the financial office traditionally, how does the ESC compare in total cost to the financial office previously?
So we are operating as if there's an ESC, and there are two superintendents. And we're doing it the exact same budget we passed and by cost center in December. Able to do that because while there's an additional superintendent, there's no assistant superintendent. And so bottom line is that was the only big shift. Everything else was just adjustments to show how we were going to function. But we were able to be budget neutral and change because we had the same number of people. We used to have two superintendents instead of a superintendent and assistant superintendent. And in fact, the Great Salt Bay superintendent is only a 60% position. So we went from having two full-time employees to 1.6. So there was a reduction in the workforce, honestly. And everybody else, still the same people, there's been adjustments. We have two superintendent professional development lines now instead of assistant and a superintendent. We have little variations of how the budget is managed, but it's the same totals in each cost center, and it's the same bottom line. And that when we shift next year, except we have a little bit more revenue, there will be things that go up in cost. That just happens. That's what budget's all about, having budgets. But there's no. I'm going to put this budget together, but there's the cost hearing budget that we'll do for September, and more. This is the budget we want to start talking about getting passed for December and October. And at this point, I'm not seeing any dramatic changes. It'd be great if we had, honestly, it'd be great if I had more people in the business office to get done what we have to do. It's hard, but we're not advocating for that this time. We're not advocating for any of that. We're just saying status quo, keep going. Yep. Sarah?
I think it's probably a popular opinion, but I think that we really do have to look at the business office and look and see what it would mean if we to add more people to that to get the work done. Because I think we do have a lot on your plate. And I think we're at ESC with all the schools, that aside from a little bit of a reduction in GSP, we're not seeing that much of a reduction in your workload. So I think that even though that might be about their opinion, is something to look at. So but I also even the schools that have our board meetings before the AOS meeting, we won't have numbers to discuss in September.
Let's change that. I get that though. I can do it tomorrow if I felt that that was the priority. I got some things.
Well, I'm looking at schools, so it's not
I think you're right. I think I should come to the school board meetings with what I'm going to show the AOS. I think that's something. Thanks for that. I'll get that ready. And if I don't have it in your folder, I'll bring it to the meeting.
As long as we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, a lot of these concerns, if you look at the interlocal agreement, the service center, a lot of the things are in the. Majority, 66 and 2/3 to eat anything around them. A good example, I single. It's 30%, it's 30%. That you could kill. Comes out and shows. That long,
That is really, these are difficult hairs to split. That's why I spent 2.5 hours with the Jefferson School Committee member that joined me, and we went through.
Yeah, but there was a couple lines that that he suggested that he and I not kind of make any determination on there, or I said, not gonna do that right here. Let's bring that to the school committees and to the AOS meeting, because that gets into, because I had already heard from another school committee member that they didn't want to change that. This person was saying we should change that, so I'm down to just a couple issues like that where I want the school committee members to get together and kind of iron out some of those details. I don't think they are they're the right ones. What you're talking about are the things I'm trying to get people to look at. But what Richard is referring to in general is the interlocal agreement, the ESC interlocal agreement, which is about a 5-page document that is one for the AOS. AOS 93 has an interlocal agreement. And it is the binding contract of how the 7 towns work together and what is possible to do in the ESC, what the governance model is, what the cost sharing is, what the services are. It's everything I showed you in a detailed legal contract. That's up on the AOS board, AOS website, under that same strategic vision 2009, right next to this presentation. It's where school committee members should be putting all their focus in the next couple of weeks. And to take it apart and see if there's anything that they don't like about it. I've had, I said that there's sort of very cultural differences in the AOS towns. And I had a very strong focused person on one end of that go through this contract. And another very strong focused person on the other end of that go through this contract. There's only 1 or 2 things that they need to agree on before they're in complete agreement on it. So I'd like that to happen. They both know that, and so do other members of the community, because I sent that out. And I'm trying to get that conversation to happen, but that is, the details are in each local agreement are critical. Tonight, I just want everybody to understand, it's the school committee's job to vote on this. The select boards, they don't vote on it. You're all talking to each other, you should be talking to each other. And the town administrators, you can all talk to your school committee members and say, I read that interlocal agreement, I think you want to look at section 5B. Have those conversations, look at those details, but get it back to your school committee members, because they're the ones that are gonna have to engage in the dialogue around any substantive changes and vote on it and fire it. Yes.
Could you, I guess, help me understand what the minimum payment increase of 5%, what's the thought process behind that?
So the thought process is that, okay, so we'll take, we don't want the inequity, but we also don't want to be so heavy-handed in minimum pay to play, if you will, that we just drop this big heavy charge on the smallest school. But the idea of this, and this is the school AOS board needs to talk about this, but this is where we have it right now, is that that's just going to get a little more painful every year unless you consolidate with somebody else to form a new entity. So it's the thought that you have to pay 100,000 minimum now, but next year 105, and then it's like 110.50, and then it's more and more. So you might want to be having discussions with your neighbor.
Peter, I should clarify, that's not on top of the cost, that's within the cost.
Yeah, that's within the cost, so balance shifts. And then peaks out at some point.
So in other words, if a couple of districts combined or towns combined, then they would have the one payment versus
Right.
the two separate.
Yeah, then there's no minimum to discuss because they have enough, kind of between them to just avoid that.
Okay.
And they're just paying the same kind of formula everybody else is. That's just based on the number of students. Laura?
Your third bullet says any member that does not reach the minimum payment, would someone not reach that minimum payment if they didn't choose two different services? When would you not reach that minimum payment?
Any member that does not reach the minimum payment of $100,000 will pay an economic inefficiency fee, so that everybody has to pay $100,000, right?
Yeah.
So right now we have everybody. So South Bristol is paying 74.
Yep.
Noble Borough is paying about 160, and then it goes up from there. So right now, the only one who is below the 100,000 is South Bristol. Any member does not reach, so when we first do it by pre-K through 12, if you only come in at 74, sorry, someone else, you gotta pay 100.
Gotcha. So for
Yeah.
previous.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then so that we pay more, and then it gets divided among the others, and there's an incentive there to combine. Now, I'm not trying to force that incentive on anybody. So if you don't like it, speak up, and we'll then talk to the other members of the school committees, and that can be changed. But right now, there's enough movement in the AOS board to push us in that direction, that I just offer this as a model, because I think it will appeal to the best consensus. Matt?
So how does that work? Say, for instance, Christmas on first of the bottom, now they drop down to 100, now you're shy of 100 on the ESC. How does that get made up?
Well, it's not like that, they're not shy of anything. If Bristol and South Bristol say they're paying separately. And right now, South Bristol's minimum go up, so $25,000 for the ESC. And that 25,000 is like a little extra subsidy for the others, right? It gets distributed to the other school districts. If they join with Bristol and they don't have to pay that extra 25,000 anymore, you just don't get that little bonus. But you save a little on this fee, but if you lose the fee, you've actually achieved more economic efficiency for the whole through this model. It's not gonna impact.
You're still upside down 75.
What's that?
You're still upside down 75,000. So if Bristol and South Bristol combined, is that 100,000 combined for both schools?
If they combine, it's gone. But it's not an extra 100,000, it's just they have to.
No.
They're already paying most of it.
That's not what I meant. Do you understand what I mean? So if you take Bristol and South Bristol right now, they're each gonna pay 100, right?
No.
You
No.
combine that.
No, for, no.
You combined that, right?
Well,
Do you see what I mean?
No.
You combine
Bristol's
it.
paying like 300, Bristol's paying like 300.
No, the pay to play. Let's go on the pay to play, right? So if each school, Marlboro, Jefferson, Bristol, GSB pay 100,000. You just said it's an incentive to combine, because now if if Bristol and South Bristol combine, their pay to play is 100.
So the piece you're missing. The 100,000 is just, you have to reach that within your number of students. You don't just start, it isn't like everybody pays 100,000 and then you pay more. It's like, we calculate it based on your students.
That's right.
And it had to be a minimum of that. It's all gonna be calculated on your students, but there's a minimum number of students.
And I guess my last question is, if a school board decides not to join, how does that work? That is part of the
So
AOS.
then that's gonna be a problem for the school board to decide not to join. Because if the others all decide to join and one doesn't, you have to find your services somewhere. And then you're gonna be approaching the ESC and asking if they can provide services for a non-member. And most of those towns, including Jefferson, have said they don't want to provide, services to anybody who's not a member. So then you're asking the ones who joined it to let you in and provide you the services, even though you didn't want to join. And the way that's usually handled is there's non-member fees, which are considerably higher than the member fees. So the idea here, Matt, is to reach consensus while we're in it. And it's not to split this thing, we're trying to, the whole goal here, why we're here tonight, is to come together as 7 towns and try to find out how to be the most cost effective we can do. We gotta find that.
And this is what, after 20 months of working on this is what I think is best. It's not done yet, but it's where I think it needs to be done. Yeah,
Back on the automatic percentage increase that's proposed. Trying to go back to understand. If this is a contracted service and the fixed cost to get the set to schools and members. Aren't we only gonna, why are we paying an assumed percentage increase if we don't know that that's the cost increase? Can the ESC
Right now-
fund balance?
right now, it's not that equitable by school. But we're not trying to turn it upside down and charge. And if we were to be absolute, I mean, I don't want to have too much of an opinion on this, but somebody could argue that every one of the 7 towns is, or at least every one of the 5 that has a PK through 8 school in it, is getting the same services. They should all pay 20% of the bill. Well, that's gonna increase Noblesboro's bill, it's gonna increase South Bristol's bill, and it's gonna make Great Salt Bay, get this free ride, even though it's got twice half the employees of the whole district. It does take more time to do payroll and things like that, and it would really upset the whole apple cart that you've now been balancing for a long. And there'd be plenty of people who could also argue that, it doesn't really take as much time to do the payroll for small schools as it does for the biggest school and things like that. Then you get into the weeds of this thing. You've been operating for 15 years by sharing costs in a certain way. The ESC picks up where you have gotten to and tries to move forward in a more equitable way. But it's not, but still hold everybody together into what their expectations, what the town's been paying, what they are right now. I don't want to just fill out the whole system and start from scratch, because I think it all be, that's a very complicated. Does that make sense, from what your question was?
I think so, it's not a 5% increase, just to assume the cost of 5%. It's
No.
just in that formula.
It's just put more pressure on the incentive.
What happens if at the end of the year, fees paid to the ESC aren't fully spent? Right now, the school doesn't spend or town doesn't spend, it stays in fund balance, which goes to the fund balance.
Same thing with the
The ESC is capable of having fund balance.
Yep. Hi.
Hi, Peter. At the beginning of the presentation, you spoke about how each of the districts, have this diversity. And I agree with you, I think that is a strength. I'm interested to know if we do make the change to an ESC. You spoke about some examples and scenarios where there were 5-1 votes, 5-2 votes. If we do make this change to an ESC, how do you see that change affecting those scenarios?
Well, ESC takes away all this work that you share cost efficiencies on, and then lets you work that out in smaller groups. Because now you're gonna have just the 4 MSUs working together in AOS 93 for a while. And you're gonna have Great Salt Bay now, kind of working on its own, being able to make its decisions. That will be less divisive, what I've seen. And then you also allow Bristol and South Bristol to continue their talks on whether or not they like the idea of being more closely aligned. And they know that the ESC is there for either or both of them. And you have Jefferson and Noblesboro know they don't have to run out and build their own, business offices because of what GSB is doing. They can all work together. So what it does is allow, you're already the shift towards one superintendent working on 4 MSUs instead of one superintendent working on 4 MSUs, 3 secondaries, and a CSD. Is Todd only has to focus on 60% of the students and employees he used to, that Lindsay had to focus on. And so.
So can I clarify for a second? Those I think are central office issues, but specifically when we're voting. And it's like a 5-1 vote, for example, we have to get to the 66%. I guess the scenario that I'm thinking of is where GSB has, is it 38%?
39.4 right now.
So if they vote no on any issue, they have the power to kill any issue that they don't want to move forward just by a
So
1.
you're absolutely right. It was actually a different member that I worked with on recently, but a member from Jefferson who actually was spoke up to me and said, I think that should be 2/3, and it's because I don't think that Great Salt Bay should be able to pass something with one other school. It should take more than one other school to pass something.
And
I
so,
was talking with the opposite of that, not of passing something, but the scenario of not passing something.
right, that's what I'm saying. When we thought it out, like, let's make it so that to pass something, you need largest number of school districts, and we got to 2/3. Which Paul also pointed out when I was talking to him, one of the water is, this evening, that the way the percentage works would leave it so that grades all pay could essentially veto things. So maybe that percentage needs to be adjusted down to 60%. But I'm not, but that's why I'm saying, I'm glad you guys brought that up. But I need the school committees to analyze that and come up with what they want that percentage to be. There's no perfect answer here. But there is the fact that you have different size entities partnering together. And you gotta come up with a way to decide to work together. I really would like some input on that because that. It's a tough one to crack, but it shouldn't be what breaks us. Yes,
When you look at the numbers and the schools, the way they're broken up, and I've done that. Seems to me you right around 5%.
what's that?
55%.
Okay, so we'll take that into consideration.
Just look at the numbers from different combinations. And just take a minute.
I don't have any, I don't have a horse in the race, what I want is consensus as much as possible. That's all I'm looking for. Yes,
This said 2/3 or minimum to additional schools.
so that, I understand, I was processing that earlier when Rich was talking, we haven't gotten through enough to say, I think that you might want to consider this number of schools. You can also have both, 66% or a minimum of 3 of the 5 schools. There could be more variations on this,
Right,
but I need board members to start talking about this.
one big school out of possibly dominating that.
It could also be by members, right? It could be by delegates to the area board.
So so let's take a look at that together. We're not gonna solve it tonight. It's the school committees and the representatives, the AOS board that can get back to me on this and we can talk that out. I do have promised some people in the room that get out of here by now. We're coming to, I don't know if there's any more questions. I'm happy to answer them. But I'll stick around and keep talking to anybody. I don't have to get.
Actually, I got 2.
Okay, let's take these 2 questions and then I'm gonna kind of try to close it down.
GSB has their own transportation.
Yes.
And you mentioned that, which I know anyway, but you didn't cover that. GSB has secondary education students that are under contract that ride the bus for a student to Lincoln Academy.
It's true.
So, Scholar, Bremen, Newcastle are gonna be charged the full amount for transportation oversight. To participate in that program, or is that gonna be?
Yes, because we do the same services for everyone, for transportation. We buy buses, we fill out,
Right, but what I'm saying is,
we don't.
if it's only 10 kids riding the bus from Damascus, Bremen, and all intermingled with Round Pond, Bristol, Bremen, some of the routes, Noble Borough. Does GSB, RSU have to pay for oversight of your pay-to-play transportation costs?
It doesn't work that way. The first student contract is we pay by bus. And each school district decides how many buses they want for what purpose, and they assign that, and then it just rolls up into a contract. Everybody pays a different amount for the first student buses. I think, Bristol for a while had 4, they used to down to 3, they get charged for how many they get billed individually by first student in that contract. It's not a shared cost. Okay,
But you oversee the contracts.
you oversee the contracts.
But if you're overseeing the contracts, those towns have to pay a certain fee to oversee those contracts. For the years.
As they do now.
So,
Because the ESC doesn't employ the head driver that works for the plus your transportation director, transportation manager, I'm sure title. But Great Salt Bay employs that and they do that work. Jefferson also is employed in that position. So the only thing the business office does for them is the things that I itemize that we do here. We handle all the contracts, vehicle purchasing, insurance, and state reports. So we provide the same level of services to everybody, whether they have a fleet or they have contracts. The contracts cost money, fleets cost money, but those are born at school, not the ESC. Does that make sense?
well, I'm just talking about oversight of the contract, the administrative side. how much, dear Scott, they only have 10 kids that ride the bus. And, are we gonna pay? Like for 50% of.
As I said, the bus fees go to the school, the oversight includes when I have to buy a bus fee, I don't have to buy a bus for Bristol, I have to buy a bus.
I'm just talking about the contract in first student.
The contract with the first student is not, we have, I guess we have 14 buses that we contract, you guys get a couple of them, others will want of them, they go there, you pay for the buses, the oversight. So you're talking about like, on the whole course of a year, 5 hours of my time. This isn't big, this isn't a cost to incur, it's something that we want to be able to itemize, because we have to itemize to the state what we're gonna do and what we're not gonna do. I don't want to not be able to do that, but it doesn't take, you're not paying. I mean, $50. I mean, it's not a huge amount of my time, but if we don't include it on here, we don't put it in the application, we don't say we do it, then I can't help. Even do that, I can't get a check cut and buy a bus. I can't, I will sit down with first student for many hours this year and negotiate another 5-year contract. And that'll be probably the bulk of the work I do over the next 5 years, but to not have it in the ESC. Application to the state that we were able to provide that would prevent me from doing it in the future.
And my
I
second,
think Josh is asking, you're not gonna charge transportation as a separate cost center then, that Great Falls is paying 50% of, with only a small, it's included within the business office cost center.
Right.
Yes,
and
that's your,
the other question I have is, say, we join the ESC. And you fail to deliver on. Something, say, right now, our audit in 2023 for secondary education has yet to be completed, so we can't do our audit for 2023. So, there are the penalties that we can assess to you.
To me,
Yeah.
before, I work for.
Yeah, I'm saying, if you fail to deliver on a certain
I can assess to you, why don't we get home for dinner? I'm just working for you. I'm an employee, well, fire me tomorrow morning. I can only help.
But if these towns are paying for a service and you say you don't have anybody in that position. How can you charge for that service?
Your board, the governance board of the ESC, you contract, you do not contract with meetings. I'm just an employee, just trying to help you. If you don't want the ESC doing these things, what the ESC is, it's not me, it's the ESC, it's the entity. It's currently, like saying, the AOS doesn't perform. Work rates all based, the ESC doesn't perform, or even secondary.
Right, but what I'm saying is, if these towns are agreeing to get into the ESC. And you're paying for a technology person, or you're paying for a service, but you don't have that position to do. But you're paying a minimum of 100,000 and you've already signed up for it, but you have no one in that position. Do you still have to pay the funds?
The taxpayers raise and appropriate the taxes. If the taxpayers approve it, and the taxes are raised and appropriated, they go into the fund. If they are unexpended, they roll forward into the fund balance.
Right, but you're advertising a product. And if you don't have anybody in that position for that product, but you're charging, right? And you're advertising to all these feeder issues and programs as a customer, I sign up for that product, but you fail to deliver. Do you get a rebate from that if you signed up for the a la carte?
Just generally with fund balance forward is, these are the things that.
Fair positions, but I just want to make sure.
Just clarify, it isn't like, okay, we have an hired IT director, so we're gonna have a couple. You won't.
right, but without what you're asking,
Yeah,
they will write us a check and give our taxes back.
Give you a rebate check. No. You fail to deliver the service.
Maybe have faith that it will fill the position.
It's all gonna be a statute, I can't change the statute. If you get fund balance forward, it rolls forward, I mean, governance board decides what to do. And the governance board provides the oversight of the operation. Okay.